In Who's Pulling Your Strings? Psychologist Harriet Breaker offers a deep exploration of emotional manipulation and how to break free from it. This video will dive into the core insights of her work, the psychology of manipulators, the vulnerabilities of their victims, and effective strategies to escape their grip, all while connecting these ideas to the realities of modern life. First, we need to understand what manipulation really is. Manipulation is a psychological strategy of control. One person influencing or dominating another for their own benefit by underhanded, deceptive, or abusive means. Unlike healthy persuasion or negotiation, manipulation is covert and exploitative. The manipulator doesn't respect the other person's autonomy or well-being, only the outcome they desire. This can take many forms, from a friend who guilt-trips you into doing endless favors, to a romantic partner who subtly isolates you from family, or a boss who implies your job is at risk if you don't bend to their demands. It's all about power and control, and it often happens under the radar, masked as love, concern, or authority, which makes it especially insidious. The book makes clear it is about emotional or psychological manipulation, not situations where physical violence or the threat of violence is used as a means of control. If someone is using physical force or threats, that crosses into outright abuse where the priority must be immediate safety. But even without ever raising a hand, a manipulator can do profound damage through mind games and emotional coercion. Now, manipulation is not a one-sided magic trick. It requires two participants, the manipulator and the target. This isn't to blame the victim, but to recognize a crucial dynamic. A manipulative relationship can only continue as long as the target, however unknowingly, plays their part by giving in. If you stop rewarding the manipulator's tactics, stop complying, apologizing needlessly, or reacting with fear to their threats, you fundamentally alter the game. This is empowering news because it means that as trapped as you might feel, you actually hold a key to change the situation, your own choices and responses. The manipulator doesn't want you to realize this. They thrive on you feeling helpless or dependent. But the moment you start responding differently, not giving them what they expect, the balance of power shifts. Of course, changing your reactions is easier said than done, because manipulation tends to erode your confidence and clarity over time. Still, the knowledge that you can do something is the first crack of light in what may feel like a dark situation. To break free, it helps to understand how you might have gotten caught in the manipulator's web to begin with. Manipulators are often very skilled at sniffing out vulnerabilities in others, those emotional buttons they can push to produce compliance. We all have certain psychological needs and weak spots, but some people's buttons are more pronounced, practically inviting exploitation by an unscrupulous person. There are several common traits or mindsets that can make someone especially susceptible to manipulation. Recognizing these in yourself is not about self-blame. It's about shining a light on why you might have been targeted and how to fortify those weak spots. One such vulnerability is the disease to please. This refers to an excessive need to be helpful and accommodating, where your self-worth becomes tied to how much you do for others and how well you can keep everyone around you happy. If you're the type who goes out of your way to avoid inconveniencing others, who says yes to every request because you can't bear the thought of letting someone down, then you might be wearing yourself out trying to be everything to everybody. A manipulator sees that and knows exactly how to use it. They'll praise your helpfulness and then make ever-growing demands, confident that you'll feel obligated to deliver. For example, a manipulative friend might constantly frame their needs as urgent crises, expecting you to drop everything repeatedly to help, because they know you'd feel guilty saying no. Or a manipulative boss might keep piling extra work on you, knowing you take pride in being the one who never complains. Your kind and diligent nature is being twisted into a leash. Closely related is an addiction to approval and acceptance. It's normal to want to be liked, but for some people this need becomes all-consuming. They dread criticism, rejection, or abandonment to the point that they'll do almost anything to avoid those outcomes. Manipulators quickly pick up on this. All they have to do is give you their approval and acceptance to hook you, and then threaten to withdraw it when they want something. If you deeply fear someone's disapproval or the idea of them leaving you, that fear becomes your master and the manipulator's ultimate lever. In love relationships, fear of abandonment is often the ultimate lever of control. A manipulative partner might subtly or overtly suggest that if you don't comply with their wishes, they'll have to reconsider the relationship or find someone who appreciates them more. Hearing that, a person who's terrified of being alone might scramble to do whatever it takes to keep their partner happy, even at great personal cost. It's a cruel exploitation of the very human need for love and belonging. Another huge vulnerability is a fear of negative emotions and conflict. Some people might jokingly say they're conflict averse, but for many it's no joke at all. It's practically a phobia. Let's say you have an extreme aversion to anger, confrontation, or anyone being upset with you. You go to great lengths to keep the peace. A manipulator can use that fear like a remote control. Something as simple as raising their voice, giving you a cold stare, or saying, "I'm very disappointed in you," can send you into a panic of appeasement. For instance, if you had a parent or partner who exploded in anger, you might have learned to do anything to avoid setting them off. Now, any manipulative person who even hints at displeasure finds you immediately trying to mollify them. Essentially, if you can't tolerate someone being mad at you, you hand them power over you. The moment they frown or threaten to make a scene, you're likely to capitulate. Living like this, walking on eggshells, constantly preempting potential outbursts, is exhausting, and it rewards the manipulator's theatrics. An extension of that is a lack of assertiveness or inability to say no. Many of us struggle with saying no, but for people pleasers, it's nearly impossible. If you've been raised or conditioned to always be agreeable, you likely feel intense guilt or anxiety at the thought of refusing any request. Manipulators absolutely love this trait. If every fiber of your being rebels at saying no, then by default you say yes to whomever is most forceful or insistent. In any group, the person who cannot say no ends up carrying the burden because someone else will surely step in and keep asking for more. A manipulator will test your boundaries little by little, maybe a small favor at first, then larger and larger demands, knowing you're unlikely to ever push back with a refusal. The sad reality is, if you can't say no, someone will always be making decisions for you. Building comfort with the word no is vital self-defense in a world where takers don't hesitate to take. Some people also have what you might call a vanishing self. This means a blurry sense of identity and personal boundaries. You're not quite sure where your needs and opinions end and someone else's begin. Maybe you're very adaptable and empathic, excellent qualities, but in the extreme, you might adopt others' goals or values as your own without realizing it. Lacking a strong core sense of self can be dangerous in the hands of a manipulator. They essentially get to write on a blank slate. If you don't have firm beliefs or preferences, a manipulative person can convince you that what they want is what you want. You become a willing soldier in their cause or a tool in their scheme because you haven't defined your own mission. A classic example is a person who falls in with a domineering friend or lover and slowly morphs their entire life to orbit that person, abandoning their own friends, hobbies, and opinions. Sometimes victims of long-term manipulation emerge not even recognizing themselves because their identity was gradually overwritten by the manipulator's agenda. Another significant vulnerability is low self-reliance or self-doubt. This manifests as a tendency to distrust your own judgment and constantly seek others' guidance or approval before making decisions. If you always feel like someone else knows better, or you're afraid to stick to your decisions, then a manipulator will happily step into the role of decision-maker for you. It might start benignly. You ask their advice, they give it. Over time, though, they might begin dictating your choices, what you should do, who you should spend time with, how you should spend money, often under the guise of helping you because you're so indecisive on your own. Before you know it, you're dependent on them for every little thing, and that gives them tremendous control. They effectively become the driver of your life while you're relegated to the passenger seat. Improving self-reliance starts with believing that your perceptions and decisions are generally valid, that even if you make mistakes, they're yours to make and learn from. Otherwise, you're vulnerable to anyone assertive enough to claim they know what's best for you. Finally, consider your locus of control. This is a psychological concept about how much control you feel you have over what happens in your life. People with a strong internal locus of control believe that their own actions largely determine their fate. Those with a strong external locus of control feel that outside forces, luck, other people, circumstances, are mostly in charge, and they're just swept along. If you have an external locus of control, you might be more prone to accepting manipulative control. Why? Because you already feel like things just happen to you or that you need others to guide you. So if a manipulator starts taking over, it almost feels natural or inevitable to you. For example, someone with an external locus might think, well, my partner is just a stronger personality. I guess it makes sense they call the shots. Manipulators encourage this mindset. They'll tell you that you couldn't cope without them, or that you're lucky to have their leadership. This keeps you doubting your ability to change anything. Part of breaking free is shifting toward an internal locus of control, realizing that you do have choices and influence over your life, that you can stand up and say, no, this isn't how it's going to go, and make your own decisions stick. It's striking how many of these vulnerabilities stem from positive qualities or perfectly normal needs that are just dialed up to an unhealthy level. Wanting to help others, wanting to be liked, seeking harmony, being flexible or humble, there's nothing wrong with any of that. Manipulators often target people who are generous, compassionate, and responsible. The problem is they exploit those traits. A manipulator doesn't go after someone who has no empathy or backbone. They look for someone kind-hearted, eager to please or unsure of themselves, and then they use those very qualities as levers of control. Recognizing this is powerful because it means you don't have to stop being a good person. You just have to protect your good nature from those who would misuse it. It's important to reflect honestly on which of these vulnerabilities you might have, because manipulators are adept at scanning for these entry points. Think of it like knowing where your armor is thin so you can reinforce it. For instance, if you admit to yourself, I really hate conflict, I cave in just to keep others happy, then you can work on tolerating a bit of disagreement without feeling like the world will collapse. Or if you realize I base my self-worth entirely on others' approval, you can actively start building an internal sense of worth, reminding yourself that you're more than what any one person thinks of you. The point is not to beat yourself up for having these tendencies, but to become aware of them, so they're not an unconscious invitation to manipulators. Now that we've looked at the target side, what about the manipulator's side? What drives someone to manipulate others? And how do they view the world? Manipulators often operate out of a few core motives and mindsets. One major motive is simple self-interest. They want something, money, sex, status, attention, a service, and they see other people as tools to obtain those benefits. If lying, flattering, or guilt-tripping you is what it takes to get what they want, they'll do it, often without remorse. This kind of manipulator is fundamentally selfish and sometimes quite calculating. Think of a friend who always lets you pick up the tab and has a sob story ready if you hesitate. They've decided their financial comfort is worth more than your sense of fairness. Or a romantic partner who showers you with affection only when they need a favor and withdraws when you need something. They're in the relationship purely for what they can extract. To such people, relationships are transactional. They might hide that attitude behind sweet words or claims of love, but their actions consistently show that their own needs come first. Another motive is a craving for power and superiority. For some manipulators, it's not just about getting a tangible benefit. It's also about the rush of control, the ego boost of being in charge and one-up over someone. These individuals see life as a competitive arena with winners and losers, and they desperately want to be the winner in every interaction. Controlling someone else, making them dance like a puppet, provides a sense of triumph. It validates their belief that they are smarter or stronger. You might observe this in a workplace bully who micromanages and intimidates subordinates, not because it improves productivity, often it harms it, but because it makes them feel powerful to see others jump. In personal life, it could be a partner who constantly corrects you, makes you ask for basic things, or plays mind games just to prove they have the upper hand. This type of manipulator often enjoys the process of breaking down someone's will, the way a cat enjoys playing with a mouse, because it feeds their sense of dominance. Closely related is the need for control itself. Some manipulators are deeply insecure or anxious when they're not in control. They might have a psychological need to orchestrate everything around them because uncertainty is intolerable to them. This can stem from various issues, sometimes a personality disorder, sometimes trauma or anxiety, but the result is the same. They try to control others as a means of controlling their environment and reducing their own anxiety. Such a person might insist on dictating even the smallest details of family life or a project at work, not only because they want power, but because not being in control makes them intensely uneasy. They often have a rigid, black and white way of thinking. Things have to be their way, or it's the wrong way. They typically struggle with any challenge to their authority. If you disagree with them, they might take it as a personal attack because in their mind, control equates to safety and rightness. Ironically, while these manipulators impose control on others, their own inner life often feels out of control. They may have volatile emotions or deep fears they haven't addressed. But instead of dealing with that chaos inside, they focus on controlling the outside world, you and everyone else. Now, underpinning these motives is a certain worldview or mindset common to many manipulators. They often have an adversarial, zero-sum view of relationships. In their eyes, every interaction has a winner and a loser, power holder and the subordinate. They lack empathy for the people they target. It doesn't really bother them if they hurt your feelings, violate your trust, or exploit your kindness, except to the extent that it might cause them problems. In fact, some manipulators take a kind of pride in being too smart to play by the rules of kindness and reciprocity. They might justify their behavior with thoughts like, "Everyone does this, I'm just better at it," or "The world's a dog-eat-dog place, I have to look out for number one." If you ever confront a hardcore manipulator about the pain they cause, you might get a blank stare or a dismissive smirk. Appealing to their sense of fairness or compassion often gets you nowhere because they don't operate on that wavelength. Some extreme manipulators may even have personality disorders, such as narcissistic or antisocial personality disorder. The latter includes what we colloquially call sociopaths or psychopaths. These conditions are characterized by a lack of genuine empathy and remorse, and a tendency to see others as objects to fulfill one's own needs. Others might have a different issue, like borderline personality disorder, where their intense fear of abandonment drives them to use manipulative tactics, for example, threatening self-harm to prevent someone from leaving. Not every manipulator fits a clinical label, but many share that basic lack of concern for your autonomy and feelings. Interestingly, not all manipulation is fully conscious. Some people manipulate almost out of habit or upbringing, rather than calculated intent. Perhaps they grew up learning that throwing a tantrum got them what they wanted, or that playing the victim made people cater to them. Over time, those tactics became second nature. If you show an unconscious manipulator what they're actually doing, maybe in therapy or through a major confrontation, it might serve as a wake-up call, and they could change if they genuinely care and want to do better. In contrast, a conscious manipulator, the kind who deliberately uses strategies on you, will rarely change just because you point out what they're doing. In fact, calling them out might just make them trickier, because now they know you're onto them. Truly determined manipulators rarely change their spots simply through reasoning or appeals. They have been getting what they want by being this way, possibly for years, so a heartfelt talk about your hurt feelings or moral principles is unlikely to flip a switch in them. This is why so much of reclaiming power lies in your behavior, changing how you respond rather than trying in vain to reform the manipulator through pleas or arguments. Breaker's book provides a vivid illustration of how manipulative dynamics play out by likening a manipulative relationship to a drama unfolding in 5 acts. A manipulative relationship can unfold like a drama in 5 acts. Let's break that down in a narrative way. Act 1 is the setup. The manipulator casts you in the role of the unwitting partner for their play. In this opening stage, they identify you as a suitable target and begin the process of drawing you in. Often this involves intense charm or kindness. They might praise you, do you small favors, show unusual interest in your life. Basically, they're making you feel special, valued, and understood. If it's a romantic scenario, Act 1 might be the classic swept off your feet phase. Lavish compliments, affectionate texts all day, perhaps even talk of soulmates or a perfect future together very early on. In a friendship or work scenario, the manipulator might come across as the nicest colleague you've ever met, or a mentor figure eager to guide you. During this act, the manipulator is also scoping out your vulnerabilities. They pay attention to what makes you smile, what makes you frown, what your ambitions or insecurities might be. For example, they might probe gently. Oh, you don't have many close family members? That must be hard, filing away that you might be hungry for a sense of family. Or, wow, you work so hard. People don't appreciate you enough. Noting that you crave recognition. By the end of Act 1, they've often succeeded in winning your trust and perhaps planted themselves in your life as something positive. A new friend, a caring partner, a generous helper. You feel warm toward them, maybe fortunate to have met them. Act 2 is about gaining leverage. Having hooked you, the manipulator now subtly starts to build your dependence on them. This act often involves escalating the intimacy or intertwining your lives. In a relationship, for instance, the manipulator might move very fast, pushing for commitment, saying, "I've never felt this connection before," and maybe even creating a sense that it's you two against the world. They might isolate you in little ways. "We don't need to go to those parties anymore. Let's just spend time together. You're all I need." In a workplace, a manipulative boss or coworker might start making you feel that you need their approval to succeed, maybe by first mentoring you, so you feel grateful and loyal, and then making themselves the gatekeeper of your opportunities. What's key in Act 2 is that the manipulator begins to reward your compliance and subtly punish your resistance. You'll notice that when you do what they want, things are great. They're loving or appreciative or give you some reward. But if you falter or hesitate, even slightly, they express disappointment or withdraw affection. It might not be something you consciously register at first. After all, overt punishment might scare you off too soon. But slowly, you learn that keeping this person happy is the ticket to good times, and displeasing them even briefly leads to coldness or tension. You're being conditioned, much like training a pet. Follow the command, get a treat. Disobey, get a mild shock. Act 3 is the manipulation proper. This is where the mask slips and the real controlling behavior fully emerges. By now, the manipulator has you emotionally invested or otherwise dependent on them. You've maybe made life changes centered around them, or you deeply care about their opinion of you. Now they start pulling the strings more blatantly. The requests become demands. The previously occasional criticisms might turn into a constant drip of put-downs that erode your confidence. They might use tactics like guilt tripping. "After all I've sacrificed, you can't do this one thing for me?" Shaming. "I can't believe you're so selfish." Threats ranging from "I'll leave you" to "You'll regret this." Or playing the victim. "If you don't help me, I don't know how I'll cope. I thought you cared about me." Gaslighting often ramps up in this stage. They deny things you know to be true, making you question your memory or sanity. For example, you clearly recall them agreeing to something, but when you bring it up, they insist, "I never said that. You're imagining things," or "Stop being crazy, that never happened." You find yourself increasingly confused and walking on eggshells. You might think, "Things used to be so good. Maybe it's my fault it's now tense. Maybe if I try harder, it'll go back to how it was." That hope keeps you tied in, striving to appease them, because you've glimpsed how wonderful they can be, back in Act 1 or 2, and you're desperate to have that version of them back. Meanwhile, from the manipulator's perspective, Act 3 is when they're harvesting what they set you up for. You're giving them what they want: your money, sex, admiration, labor, whatever it is, and they're in control. If you resist or question them, they'll double down on the manipulative tactics. They might alternately bully and then briefly love bomb you again in cycles to keep you off balance. At this stage, a victim often feels like nothing they do is ever enough. The goalposts keep moving, and their own sense of judgment is so clouded that they rely on the manipulator to define reality. Act 4 is the fallout or crisis. Manipulation, especially severe manipulation, inevitably causes strain that leads to some kind of breaking point. Fallout can take many forms. It could be an explosive confrontation where you, the victim, finally hit a limit and express your hurt or anger, perhaps saying something like, "I can't take this anymore." This is crazy. Or it could be that your mental or physical health starts to crack. Maybe you have a panic attack, or a bout of depression, or friends step in because they see you deteriorating. Sometimes Act 4 is triggered by an external event that forces a crisis, like you discover a major lie the manipulator told, or someone else exposes their behavior. In this act, the manipulator's control is threatened, and their response will tell you a lot. Some manipulators double down on their tactics at this point. For example, faced with your attempt to stand up for yourself, they might unleash the most extreme guilt trip yet. How can you do this to me now of all times, after I've been through so much? Or escalate to actual threats. You'll be sorry, you'll never find someone like me, or I'll ruin your career if you leave. Alternatively, a cunning manipulator might temporarily feign remorse or change. If they sense you truly might walk away, they could suddenly break down in tears, apologize profusely, promise to get therapy, etc. They'll throw you a bone of hope to reel you back in. It's often hard to tell in the moment whether this is genuine or just another tactic. Many victims, out of love or exhaustion, give the manipulator one more chance at this stage, especially if the manipulator convincingly plays the sorry, misunderstood soul. Act 4 is emotionally turbulent. You, the target, are oscillating between hope, fear, anger, and confusion. It's the climax of the story where something has to give. Either you start to break the cycle, or you get sucked into an even deeper level of manipulation after a temporary calm. Act 5 is the resolution. In the ideal scenario, this is when the cycle is broken for good and the manipulative relationship ends or is transformed beyond recognition. The final curtain comes down on the drama. For many, this means ending the relationship, quitting the job, leaving the partner, cutting off the toxic friend or relative. It can be dramatic. Perhaps you plan an escape, enlist support from others, or simply tell them it's over and endure the storm that follows until it passes. In other cases, Act 5 might be a more internal resolution. You emotionally disengage even if physical separation takes time, effectively immunizing yourself so the manipulator's tricks no longer work while you prepare to move on. On the other side of Act 5 is freedom, though it might come with scars and a period of recovery. However, not every story reaches a clean Act 5 the first time around. If the manipulator successfully sucked you back in during Act 4 with apologies or intimidation, then what happens is a reset. The cycle begins anew. There might be a honeymoon period as things seem better, a new Act 1. But without real change, the same patterns reemerge. Some people go through numerous cycles, Act 1 to 4, back to Act 1 and so on, over years. Breaker's aim, and the aim of any intervention like this discussion, is to help you achieve a true final Act 5, the end of the manipulative cycle, rather than remaining trapped in an endless play that repeats over and over. These 5 acts might sound familiar to you. Many people can probably map their own experiences or those of someone they know onto this structure. It underscores how common these patterns are. In fact, in recent years, there's been a surge of public awareness about such manipulative dynamics. Terms like toxic relationship, gaslighting, and narcissistic abuse have entered everyday conversation. The concept of a partner being emotionally controlling and demeaning, what we now often call narcissistic abuse, has become widely recognized, with countless support groups and resources available. People share stories that follow the exact cycle we just outlined: a charming beginning, a gradual increase in control, a period of confusion and entrapment, and, one hopes, eventual escape. The term love bombing, for example, is now commonly used to describe Act 1 and 2 of a manipulative romantic relationship, where one person overwhelms the other with affection, attention, and promises to create a quick, intense bond. And gaslighting, a manipulative tactic we've mentioned, was even named a word of the year recently due to how frequently people have been using it to describe their experiences. The fact that these terms are now so well known is actually a hopeful sign. It means more people are identifying and labeling manipulation when it happens, which is the first step toward resisting it. Manipulation isn't limited to romantic partnerships. It can be deeply embedded in family dynamics as well. Many of us have seen or experienced cases of a family member who constantly pulls the strings. It might be a parent who uses guilt as a weapon, After all I've sacrificed for you, and you can't even do this one thing? Clearly you don't really care about me. That's a classic guilt trip, making you feel like a bad child unless you comply with their wishes, even if those wishes are unreasonable. Or it could be a sibling who always makes themselves the center of drama at every family gathering, so that everyone ends up catering to their emotional needs. Perhaps an elderly relative manipulates through martyrdom. Oh, don't worry about me. I'll just sit here alone. I know you youngsters have better things to do. Implicitly shaming you into paying attention to them. These scenarios are sadly common, but what's changing is that people are more willing to talk about them now. Setting boundaries with family, something that used to be almost taboo, how dare you not do everything for your family, is now a recognized and often necessary practice for mental health. It can be extremely hard because emotional ties in families are strong, but calmly and firmly refusing to play along, politely asserting your own needs instead of automatically apologizing, can begin to diffuse those patterns. For example, you might gently respond to a guilt-laden remark with, "I'm sorry you feel hurt, but I have responsibilities I can't ignore. I will call or visit when I can." You're not being cruel, you're just not taking the bait of the guilt trip. More and more, therapists and writers are reassuring people that it's okay to set limits even with parents or relatives, that love doesn't mean unlimited compliance. This perspective essentially gives permission to break the cycle of obligation manipulation. If a family member consistently manipulates you and harms your well-being, you do not have to accept that behavior, no matter what title they hold, mother, grandfather, etc. You can love someone and still insist on respectful treatment. Now let's consider the workplace. The phrase toxic work environment has gained a lot of traction recently, and at its core, it often involves manipulation and abuse of power. A manipulative boss might use fear and confusion, just like a manipulative spouse would. They can gaslight employees. Imagine being told, "I never approved that project," when you clearly remember them doing so, leaving you scrambling and doubting your memory. Or they might pit coworkers against each other, a strategy known as triangulation. "By the way, your colleague said they're not sure you're pulling your weight. I'd up your game if I were you," which breeds mistrust and keeps everyone competing for the boss's favor. They may also leverage your financial insecurity or professional ambitions to control you, implicitly threatening your job or a promotion. For example, hinting, "There are going to be layoffs, but those who go the extra mile for the company will be safe," while piling an absurd workload on you. That's using fear of loss of your livelihood to manipulate you into working unreasonable hours. The dynamic of, "If you don't do everything I ask, you'll suffer," is the workplace version of fear of abandonment. The encouraging news is that employees and society at large are becoming more vocal against such manipulation. There's a stronger emphasis now on work-life balance and healthy work cultures. People are learning to say no to taking on unrealistic workloads or being constantly available, even if it means risking some displeasure from higher-ups. The idea is that a decent workplace will respect reasonable boundaries. And if it doesn't, the problem lies with the workplace, not with you. Valuing your own well-being and not being afraid to, professionally, displease a boss by asserting a boundary is key. For example, it's increasingly acceptable for an employee to say, "I'm unable to stay late tonight as I have other commitments, but I will have this done by tomorrow afternoon." Not long ago, many would have feared saying such a thing, but now it's recognized as a healthy assertion. It's risky. Standing up to any manipulative authority carries some risk, but the more people do it, the more it establishes a norm that manipulation and unreasonable demands aren't okay. We've seen movements and discussions, like the push for mental health awareness at work, or even the recent quiet quitting trend where employees set boundaries by not exceeding their official duties, that reflect this collective resistance to manipulation in the workplace. Beyond personal relationships and offices, think about manipulation in the media and politics. While Breaker's book focuses on personal relationships, the same psychological principles can appear in the public sphere. Political propaganda and certain media tactics often play on people's emotions in manipulative ways. Fear is a big one. Leaders might use emotional blackmail on a mass scale by saying things like, "Our country will fall apart if you don't support me," or by demonizing an outgroup. "Those people are out to get you and only I can protect you." This is a form of manipulation because it aims to short-circuit people's rational thinking and get them to act out of fear and anger. A concept known as the big lie is a propaganda technique that parallels interpersonal manipulation. It involves telling a huge falsehood with such conviction and repetition that people start to accept it as truth. On an individual level, a manipulator might promise you a fantastical reward that never materializes or make a dire threat they can't carry out, just to see if you'll take the bait. On a societal level, we've seen instances where repeating a colossal falsehood over and over makes the public question their own understanding of reality, which is essentially large-scale gaslighting. Advertising and social media similarly employ manipulation. Ads often play on insecurities. Buy this or you'll be unattractive. You'll be left out, which is a calculated emotional hit to prompt you to buy something out of fear or shame. Social media algorithms exploit intermittent reinforcement to keep us hooked. Think about how apps send you unpredictable notifications, mixing likes and comments in a way that you never know what you'll get when you check your phone. That unpredictability and occasional reward, a burst of social validation, for instance, is the same principle a manipulator might use by giving affection or approval on a random schedule to keep their target anxious and eager to please. Understanding manipulation on a personal level can also make us more critical of these mass tactics. You start to recognize when a message is trying to bypass your critical thinking and go straight for your gut feelings. You might pause and ask, hold on, is this news segment trying to scare me into a certain viewpoint? Is this advertisement making me feel inadequate just to sell me something? By stepping back and questioning what feeling a message is trying to evoke, you become less easily swayed by manipulative media. The more individuals cultivate their own independent thinking and set boundaries on what they accept, skills like these, the more collectively resistant society becomes to manipulation by charismatic figures or sensationalist media. In a world of information overload and spin, this critical mindset is like a shield for our collective psyche. By now, we've painted a rather extensive and maybe heavy picture of manipulation in all its forms. But it's important to pivot to hope and empowerment. The entire point of exposing these dynamics is so that you can break free and regain control of your life. According to many psychologists, the first step toward liberation is recognizing and labeling what's happening. By learning about these dynamics, you've already armed yourself with knowledge. You can identify the red flags of manipulative tactics and the emotional buttons they target. Awareness cuts through the fog of confusion that manipulators rely on. For example, instead of just feeling a vague guilt and giving in, you can consciously think, wait, I feel guilty because I'm being guilt-tripped right now. The moment you label that, the spell is weaker. The guilt isn't an absolute truth, it's a tool someone is using on you, and you can choose not to pick it up. Likewise, if you notice, this person is raising their voice, and I'm starting to panic. That's my conflict phobia flaring up. You can take a deep breath and remind yourself that their anger is their issue, not an emergency you have to fix. Once you have that awareness, there's a whole toolkit of resistance tactics you can employ. One of the simplest but most effective is delaying your response, essentially buying time. Many manipulators pressure you to make decisions on the spot, to comply immediately before you can think it through or consult others. They thrive on impulsive yeses. So you refuse to be rushed. Say things like, let me think about it, or I'll get back to you on that, or even, I need to check my schedule. This seemingly small move wrests a chunk of power back to your side. It breaks the momentum of their pressure tactics. If they insist, no, I need an answer now, you calmly repeat, I understand this is important, but I make it a policy not to decide right away. I'll let you know tomorrow. What can they do? They're thwarted from boxing you into a quick capitulation. By stalling, you give yourself breathing room to consider the request without duress, and oftentimes the manipulator might back off or target someone else when they see you won't be cornered so easily. Another classic tactic is the broken record. This means choosing a simple response or boundary and repeating it as necessary without getting drawn into elaborate arguments or sidetracks. For example, if someone keeps demanding a big favor, you calmly repeat that you can't do it, no matter what arguments or guilt trips they launch. Eventually, they may realize their tactics aren't working. The beauty of the broken record technique is that you're not trying to out-argue the manipulator on the merits of their request, which is usually a losing battle since they'll twist logic endlessly. You're just standing firm. It might go like, "Please, I really need you to do this." "I'm sorry, I won't be able to." "But why? I would do it for you in a heartbeat." "I hear you, but I won't be able to." "This is really disappointing. I thought I could count on you." "I understand you feel that way, but my answer is no." You become a broken record, stuck on the groove of your refusal until they give up. It can be incredibly empowering the first time you do this and realize you don't have to engage with all the manipulative fluff. You can just keep calmly asserting your position. Emotional detachment is another crucial skill. Manipulators hook us through our emotional reactions, whether it's fear, guilt, or anger. If you can keep your emotions steady in the face of their provocations, you deprive them of a lot of power. This doesn't mean you become cold or unfeeling. It means you practice not letting their manufactured drama hijack your mind. It helps to mentally rehearse staying calm when pressure or conflict comes your way. If you expect that a certain person will try to push your buttons, you might visualize the scenario in advance and see yourself responding with an even tone and a clear head. For instance, if a coworker usually guilt trips you into covering their work by saying how overwhelmed they are, anticipate it. Plan a polite refusal. Picture them pouting or getting annoyed, and see yourself not getting flustered, just sticking to, "I'm sorry, I can't help this time." By preparing, you reduce the shock value of their tactics. In the moment, remind yourself to breathe slowly and speak a bit lower and slower than your impulse. This keeps you grounded. You might even repeat a mantra in your head like, "Their urgency is not my urgency," or "Stay cool." Over time, by not giving them the emotional reactions they want, you effectively train the manipulator that their usual tricks are less and less effective on you. If it feels safe, you can even call out what's happening in a factual, non-attacking way. This is a more confrontational approach, and it might or might not be suitable depending on the situation, but it can be powerful. For example, you might calmly say to a manipulative friend, "You know, whenever I have other plans, you tell me how much you needed me and make me feel guilty. It seems like you're trying to guilt trip me into changing my mind." Stating that aloud brings the covert tactic to light. Or telling a partner, "I notice that when I disagree with you, you start raising your voice and calling me names. It feels like you're trying to intimidate me into compliance. That's not okay." Doing this takes courage because you're effectively shining a spotlight on the manipulator's MO, and they will likely deny it or even get angry. They might respond, "How dare you accuse me of that? I'm not manipulating you. I really am hurt," and turn it back on you. But even if they deny it, the dynamic has shifted. You've shown that you're aware of the game. The veil of innocence, "I'm just upset, hurt, not manipulating you," is a little thinner now. You're basically indicating, "I see what you're doing." Some manipulators will back off when confronted because they know it's harder to succeed now. Others will try new tactics, but you can keep calmly naming behaviors if needed, or just stick to your boundaries. A bold step, when you're ready, is flat out refusing to be manipulated any longer and communicating that resolve. This is the line in the sand moment. It might sound like, "I'm done with these guilt trips and threats. They won't work on me anymore." Or, "I will not continue this relationship under these conditions." You're directly declaring that the jig is up. The moment you do this, you often feel a surge of self-respect, but it can also be scary because you're effectively daring the manipulator to do their worst, and you have to be prepared for whatever that entails. They might rage, they might cry, they might storm out. By declaring openly that their tactics no longer affect you and you will not play along, you psychologically free yourself. You're no longer pretending to be oblivious or okay with their behavior. This can provoke a strong reaction. They might, for instance, lash out with, "Fine, if you won't do as I want, we're through." To which, painful as it is, you say, "All right," and let them leave. Or they might break down and beg. But importantly, you have shifted the power to your side by asserting your agency. Hand in hand with that declaration is the need to set new terms for any continued relationship. It's one thing to say, "Stop manipulating me, I won't take it." But it helps to also say, Here's what I expect if we're going to interact. For instance, you might tell a manipulative family member, I want us to have a good relationship, but from now on, I'm not going to engage when you start yelling or insulting me. I will end the call or leave the room if it happens. Or you inform your partner, I need mutual respect. We can disagree, but I won't accept name-calling or threats. If that continues, I can't stay in this relationship. These statements assert standards for how you will be treated. The manipulator has a choice: adapt or eventually lose access to you. Often, they'll test those boundaries to see if you're serious. You have to be prepared to enforce them. For example, actually ending that phone call when the parent starts screaming, even if it feels horrible to hang up on your mother or father, or packing your bags if the partner keeps violating your boundary, despite warnings. Enforcing boundaries is hard, especially at first. But each time you do it, you become stronger and the manipulator loses ground. You're making yourself a hardened target, someone who is not easily affected by manipulation because you have strong, clearly defined limits. Now, in situations where you need ongoing contact with the manipulator, say it's a workplace or a family member you can't entirely cut off, you might attempt to negotiate a healthier arrangement once you've asserted yourself. For example, with a somewhat reasonable boss, you might say, I understand this project is critical and I'm committed to it, but I also need to maintain a sustainable schedule. Let's find a solution where the workload is manageable. You're showing willingness to collaborate, but on fair terms. A reasonable person might respond well to that, adjusting their expectations because they see you're standing firm on not being overburdened. However, be aware that if someone is truly a manipulator with no intent to change, they might agree in the moment and then find subtle ways to revert. Always keep an eye on actions, not just words. If the pattern of manipulation continues despite your attempts to find compromise, it may reaffirm that you'll have to distance yourself or involve higher authorities, your HR, or other measures to protect yourself. A critical aspect of breaking free is accepting that sometimes the only viable solution is to leave the relationship or drastically cut contact. Walking away from a manipulator can be incredibly hard. You may have deep emotional ties to them, love, loyalty, or even just the familiarity and time invested. You might fear repercussions. If it's an employer, financial hardship. If it's a partner, maybe threats of self-harm or stalking. If it's a family member, perhaps the wrath or judgment of other relatives. You may also simply fear the unknown. What will life be like without this person? Am I going to be alone? Will I ever find another job, relationship? These worries are valid and normal. Leaving a manipulative situation often involves significant upheaval, but sometimes it's absolutely necessary for your survival and sanity. A useful perspective here is, as long as you are not willing to lose the relationship, the manipulator has all the power. They know you'll do anything to keep it, so they can ask anything. The scales only balance when you're truly prepared to walk away. That doesn't mean you have to eagerly want the relationship to end. It means you conclude that losing the relationship is better than continuing to lose yourself. Once you reach that point, a shift happens in you. The fear of the unknown starts to feel less dire than the certainty of ongoing abuse. Many survivors describe that moment of resolve. It often comes after an especially glaring incident where something in them snaps and says, enough, I deserve better than this. From there, you might quietly plan your exit, save money, line up a new place to live, gather support. Or you might make a sudden break if the situation calls for it. There will likely be a confrontation, or at least a declaration from you, and the manipulator will react poorly. That's almost a given. But once you've left, and time passes, most people say they can't believe they tolerated the abuse for so long. They often wish they had left sooner. Getting out can literally be life-saving. People have reported that chronic anxiety, depression, even physical ailments miraculously improved once they were free of their manipulator. It's like finally getting fresh air after living in a smoke-filled room. Throughout this journey of breaking free, building resilience and finding support is crucial. Manipulation often thrives in isolation. Many manipulators deliberately isolate their victims from others who might offer perspective. Those friends of yours don't really care about you like I do, or don't tell anyone about our issues they wouldn't understand. So reconnecting with a support network can be a turning point. Reach out to supportive friends, family, or counselors who can validate your experiences and help you see the situation clearly. Talking to someone outside the bubble can remind you that the behavior you're tolerating is not normal or acceptable, and that you're not alone or crazy for feeling hurt. Sometimes just hearing, "That sounds really unfair," from an objective person can pierce through months or years of gaslighting. Supportive loved ones can also help you muster the courage to implement the changes we discussed, practicing with you how to say no, or being there as a safe haven when you do walk away. Professional help can be very beneficial as well. A therapist, for example, provides a safe space to rebuild your sense of self that the manipulation chipped away. They can help deprogram some of the manipulator's voice in your head, all those internalized criticisms, or the guilt that lingers even when you try to stand up for yourself. Therapy can also help you process the emotional trauma you've been through, because make no mistake, prolonged manipulation is a form of psychological trauma. It leaves wounds that need care. Learning to communicate assertively is another key part of recovery and growth. If you've been under someone's thumb, you might have gotten used to staying quiet, avoiding making waves, or you might only express yourself through emotional outbursts after long periods of holding things in. Assertive communication is a middle path. It means expressing your thoughts, feelings, and needs clearly, directly, and respectfully in the moment, rather than stuffing them down or exploding. This doesn't come naturally to everyone, especially not to someone conditioned to defer and submit, but it can be learned gradually. Start with small steps. Voice a preference when normally you'd say, "Oh, anything is fine." If a friend asks, "Where should we eat?" and you usually always say, "Up to you," try stating what you feel like. "Actually, I'd love some sushi today." That's a tiny everyday assertion of a want, or practice saying no in low-stakes situations. Maybe a coworker asks you to take on a minor task that you realistically don't have time for. Instead of automatically saying yes, try, "I'm sorry, I can't take that on right now." These may seem like trivial scenarios, but if you've been manipulated, even trivial assertiveness can feel daunting. Each time you manage it, though, you build your confidence. You start to realize, hey, the world didn't end when I said no or expressed a differing opinion. You also learn that assertiveness doesn't equal being mean. It's entirely possible to honor your needs while still being polite and kind. The more comfortable you get with this in daily life, the more second nature it will be when you're dealing with a high-pressure manipulation situation. You'll be able to say, "I understand you want this from me, but I won't be doing that," and hold the line. Additionally, being assertive helps you catch boundary crossings early. Often, manipulation begins with small boundary tests. A little imposition here, a slightly rude comment there. If you address those early, "I don't appreciate that remark," or "Actually, I can't lend you money on such short notice," a serious manipulator might give up on you and move on to an easier target, or at least you'll make it clear that you're not an easy mark. By responding to minor violations, you prevent them from snowballing into major ones. Taking care of yourself, physically, emotionally, socially, is also a critical part of reclaiming your life. Manipulative relationships tend to be all-consuming. They demand so much mental energy and time that you likely neglected self-care. Now is the time to flip that script. Ensure you are eating well, getting some rest, maybe exercising or doing activities that make you feel good in your body. Pursue hobbies or interests that you shelved. Reconnect with parts of your life that gave you joy or pride. Not only do these things rebuild your health and happiness, they also reinforce the message that you matter. Every time you invest in yourself, you're silently countering the manipulator's narrative that only they matter or that you exist to serve them. Self-care might sound like a cliche, but it's truly the antidote to the dependency and self-neglect that manipulation instills. As you pursue your own goals, nurture your talents, and surround yourself with people who appreciate you, your identity and confidence grow stronger. You start to see a future for yourself that isn't overshadowed by the manipulator, and that future looks bright and inviting. It's also important to remember that feelings are not facts. A manipulative relationship can make you feel powerless, worthless, even unlovable. But that doesn't mean you actually are those things. Those are feelings that have been induced in you by constant criticism, gaslighting, or control. You can acknowledge the feelings. "I feel really low and like I can't do anything right," while reminding yourself of the bigger picture. That's how I've been made to feel. It's not objective reality. In truth, you are capable and worthy, and that part of you will reemerge with time away from the toxic influence. Often, once people step out of a manipulative environment, they're surprised at how their sense of humor returns, or their competence at work suddenly improves, or their mood lifts. It's like clouds parting. It reinforces that the negative self-image and despair weren't you. They were a product of living under constant siege. As you stand up for yourself and see that nothing terrible happens, in fact, your life gets better, those feelings of helplessness and fear will gradually dissipate. They get replaced by a sense of empowerment and pride. It's a transformative process. You go from seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances to seeing yourself as an active agent who can make choices and affect change. After escaping manipulation, there's often a period of rediscovering who you are outside of the manipulator's shadow. This can actually be an exciting journey. You get to ask yourself sometimes for the first time in years, what do I want? What do I enjoy? What kind of people do I want to surround myself with? The answers might surprise you, especially if you've been told what to think and feel for a long time. Some survivors find new or long-buried passions. Perhaps they start painting again, or traveling, or they go back to school, things they were discouraged from doing before. Many also find a new purpose in using their experience to help others. Some survivors of manipulative relationships even go on to help others or become advocates for healthy relationship education. They channel their experience into something meaningful, perhaps to ensure that others don't have to suffer the same way or to support those who are currently in the thick of it. It's a great example of post-traumatic growth, turning a negative ordeal into fuel for positive change in yourself and even in your community. As we put all this together, a clear message emerges. You do not have to be a pawn in anyone's game. Whether it's a toxic partner, a controlling family member, a cunning colleague, or even the barrage of media trying to push your buttons, you can reclaim your agency. Manipulation works by making you forget your power, by blinding you to your own ability to say no, to set boundaries, to define reality for yourself. But manipulation is not an all-powerful mystical force. It's a set of behaviors and tactics that, once seen, can be confronted and defeated. Breaking free is rarely easy or instantaneous. It's a process, often a difficult one, with setbacks and moments of doubt. But consider the alternative: staying in a web where your thoughts, emotions, and choices are constantly being engineered by someone else. Realizing that, you come to see that any short-term pain of standing up for yourself or walking away is so worth the long-term gain of living your own life. Ultimately, everything we've discussed comes down to regaining control. Control of your decisions, your emotions, your relationships, and by extension, your life's direction. It's about breaking the cycle of manipulation so it doesn't repeat with the next person or in the next job. It's about ensuring that respect and honesty, rather than hidden agendas and power plays, guide your interactions. And on a broader scale, as more people learn to spot and resist manipulation, we foster a culture that simply doesn't tolerate this kind of exploitation. That makes it harder for manipulators, period. So take these insights to heart. Reflect on where they resonate in your own experience. If you find that someone in your life has been pulling your strings, know that you have the power to cut those strings. It won't always be easy. It might be one of the hardest things you do, but it will be worth it. You deserve relationships that uplift you, not ones that weigh you down. You deserve to be the ones steering your own life, not relegated to the passenger seat. Breaking free from manipulation is not just about ending one bad relationship or situation. It's a declaration of self-worth and a choice for freedom and self-determination in the rest of your life. That's a victory worth striving for, and it's entirely within your reach.